Okay.
Welcome to Shattered Reality with your hosts Kate Valentine and Fahrusha. Prepare to have your paradigms shifted and your truths questioned. And now, Shattered Reality.
Well, hi there, Fahrusha. Here we are again.
Hey, Kate. Today is July 31st, 2018. And if you follow, shamanistic kind of studies, sometime tonight into tomorrow is called cross quarters, Midsummer's Night. And that's what the Shakespearean play was basically about, because it persists in Northern Europe, particularly in Great Britain and the British Isles, Ireland as well, sort of a veneration of the solstice, the equinox, and then the cross quarters. So we're right now the exact time between the summer solstice, which is generally around June 21st, and the autumn equinox, which is generally around September 21st. Now, because the calendar isn't perfect, it goes back and forth by a couple of days. But that's not what we're here to talk about, is it?
No, it isn't. But it was celebrated on the Golden Girls, too.
Was it really?
Yeah, there was a whole episode on it.
On Midsummer Night?
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, I'll have to look at the...
Blanche.
Okay.
Yeah, okay. Anyway, we got two handsome guys with us here today, so this is terrific.
We got two very handsome guys with us. Before I introduce them, I did want to mention the fact that I was at the MUFON Symposium on Saturday, July 28th and Sunday, July 29th. And I was rather disappointed that the private speaker of the evening, where there was supposed to be a one-on-one with Luis Elizondo, who purportedly is in the process of doing some disclosure via the Defense Intelligence Agency, but he got called away at the last minute. But to MUFON's credit, they did give me back the $50 extra they were charging to do a Q&A with him. But they did give the money back, but I was majorly disappointed in that. However, I want to speak to something else. A very famous abductee was there, which I'm sure both of our guests have heard of. That person was Travis Walton. And I have met Travis Walton a couple of times. I mean, we're not even acquaintances. He meets so many people. But I have had the pleasure of seeing him speak in person. I believe this is the third time. Have his book, have all that stuff going on. I went over to Calvin's table. I analyzed his handwriting. He seemed to be very amused, interested, pleased about that. But at the end of his presentation on Sunday, July 23rd, he did have a Q&A. And in his Q&A, a gentleman got up, the last questioner, a MUFON, I don't know if he was a MUFON executive or a MUFON investigator, probably an investigator. A gentleman got up and said to him, Calvin, I have two questions for you. You can not answer if you want. You can answer just the first and not the second, or whatever you want. And so he said, Travis, since your abduction experience and the fact that you're pretty public about it and you've been around to a lot of conferences and stuff, have you ever seen someone there that at the conferences or in a public venue that you thought was not quite human, like maybe they were a hybrid or maybe somebody who was sort of posing as a human? I don't know how to explain this exactly. He said something of that nature. And if you have, could you first at least just say yes or no? And if you can't go further than that, I'll understand, but maybe you want to tell us the circumstances of seeing such an individual. And Travis Walton went up to the microphone. He took a deep breath. He looked around. He said, "Yes, I have." He walked away from the microphone and he left the room. So, with that,
right.
With that, I want to introduce our two guests for today. The first one is Calvin Parker from the Pascagoula incident, who has written a marvelous new book that has been published by Philip Mantle, and we are indebted to Philip Mantle for getting Calvin on with us today. Welcome, Calvin. The second person that we have on is Terry Lovelace, who is also an abductee and has been on the show before. I believe he was on in April, but I might be off a little bit. A half a dozen shows ago, Terry Lovelace was on with me. Kate couldn't make it that day. And Terry will be asking Calvin some questions during the show. But first, let's welcome both of them.
Yeah, well, welcome to the show, both of you guys, Calvin and Terry.
Thank you.
Well, thank you.
So, Calvin, a lot of people know of the Pascagoula incident. Before I ask you to recount the general facts about that, I wonder if you could tell us a little bit about your life in Mississippi, about your relationship with the other abductee, and tell us a little bit about what got you out into the woods that night fishing.
I was living in Laurel, Mississippi, but a longtime friend. I was not a longtime friend of Charlie's, but my father was a longtime friend of Charlie Hickson, the guy that was with me. Mm-hmm. So I was in the oil field, and it was 7 days a week, 16 hours a day, and I was going to get married in November. So I wanted something a little more settled, a job kind of more settled down. And Charlie had an opening at the shipyard for a ship fitter. So I called Charlie up. Daddy told me about it, and I called Charlie up and went to work for Charlie at the shipyard. And I hate to say it, but I was just there 2 days when all this happened, so it didn't last long.
Oh, boy.
But we used to fish together with Charlie, and I'm good friends with his children and our siblings or whatever they are. But, you know, I know them real well. Like I say, Charlie and I were not friends up until this part here, because he was a good deal older than I was. So, anyhow.
Go ahead.
When we got off work that day is when we decided to go fishing. But okay, I moved in with Charlie. So when we got off work that evening, we decided we was going to go fishing. So we went to Charlie's house and picked up the fishing equipment, and we drove to a old abandoned shipyard that was had been abandoned for a good while, because Charlie said there was good fishing there and one other place, an old grain elevator where they used to load grain. So we got to the shipyard and pulled up, and it was a darn mess trying to get in there and all. And I was thinking, boy, this is a way far out of the way place. I asked Charlie, I said, why do they leave such a mess down in here? He said, well, the water gets up real high and it washes all this in off everybody's property. And then when it goes out, it stays. He said, that's just to answer your question honest. So it was a real struggle to carry the fishing equipment from my car to the pier where we was fishing. It was probably length of a football field away. So we got the equipment and we went to the pier and we sat down and was fishing. We was there just a little bit, and I seen reflecting across the water from behind us. Now, a lot of people think this happened. The craft landed on the water, but it didn't. It landed back behind us in the marsh grass. And I seen a reflection of some blue lights, and I said, well, you know, I said, Charlie, the law's down here. I bet they're going to make us move because we're trespassing on this other property here. Oh, we're not trespassing. Everybody fishes here, what he said. I said, well, anyhow, they back there. So I stood up and I turned around and looked, and I was surprised. I said, Charlie,
Oh.
You need to take a look. And he stood up and he looked. And about that time, the lights just got extremely bright coming off of this, really not off the craft, but they had opened the door, whatever was in it, opened the door up, and the lights were so bright coming out, it almost blinds you. I think at one time I described it like looking at somebody welding something. That's how bright the lights were. And it was three, I don't know if they was robots or what they were, but they floated out of the craft about 2 foot off the ground. The craft never set directly on the ground. It was probably 2 foot hovering 2 foot off the ground, and you didn't hear any noise coming from it. Two of them got a hold of Charlie, and one got a hold of myself.
Oh, boy.
And they floated me inside. I mean, the second they got a hold of me, the fear left, because I was really considering running, but there was just nowhere to run. So the very minute they got a hold of me, I figured they gave me some kind of injection, because I felt a little sting and I heard a little noise in my arm. So I said, well, they injected me with something.
Oh, boy.
But they floated me, inside the crowd. Well, I couldn't see Charlie because I couldn't turn my head and look, because this time I feel like I was drugged. So they floated us inside the craft, and they made a little left, and they made an immediate right with me. And I looked around, and it's where I could see just in front of me. There wasn't no light fixtures or anything, and I couldn't figure out on my life where all the lights was coming from, just like it was coming out of the walls. And this creature took me over, or this being or whatever he was, laid me down on something. I felt like it was probably a table, and I was at about a 45-degree angle, but I couldn't feel no table under me. I couldn't feel nothing, and I had lost all my sense then, because I'm assuming the pain. Well, he got up and he left. And
the being, you mean the being got up and left?
The being left. This one here, I think this one was more like a robot than a being, because when this one left, there's another one that looked a little better, that come in. I'm thinking to myself, this has got to be a female because it's built like a female, but it wasn't built like a female, but it was a little easier to look at than the one that left. I call it the big ugly one left, and they left this one in. And there was a deal probably the size of a deck of cards that was spinning, just going around my head.
A disc?
Circling.
No,
it wasn't a disc. It was something about the size of a deck of cards, and it was silver on bottom, but it would click. It would go click, 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 and it did that 4 times, front, side, back, side, front. And then the disc just kind of went back up into the wall somewhere. I don't know exactly where it went. And that's when this female creature come, and she did like a little examination there. And then I was thinking to myself, I can take her and I'll get the hell out of here. I'm not going to hang around this tube. But I couldn't move. I couldn't resist any at all. So she turned around and went back out the room. Never seen a door that she came out of. Never seen no windows in there. And this big ugly one come back in and got me and carried me out to the river. He set me down exactly about the same place I was, but I was facing the river this time with my arms stretched out. And that's when I heard Charlie. Charlie said, Calvin, you okay? You okay, son? And that was really a relief to hear his voice. But after they set us down, we sat there for a few minutes. He said, well, sit down, let's talk about this. I said, let's talk about this, Charlie. Me and you. I don't want nobody else to know. I don't want to tell nobody. I don't want to call nobody. This is it. It's over with for me. And he said, well, we got to call somebody. I said, well, I ain't calling nobody. He said, well, we're going to call Kiesler. So
Who's that?
He said, that is the Air Force base, local Air Force base here.
Okay.
So we went back to my car, and I noticed it was a struggle to get back to the car through all that debris, But before we left, I turned around and looked, and this thing went straight up in the air, and it disappeared within just a second. I mean, it was just zip, and it was gone. It made a little swooshing noise. And when I got to the car, my car was parked kind of parallel with it, and the driver's side the passenger side toward the craft, and the windows was shattered. The passenger side window was shattered in my car.
Oh, boy.
And but it was shattered in place. It hadn't fell out yet. Matter of fact, it didn't fall till Charlie opened the door to get in, and then it just fell out, hit the ground. Well, at the time, this was 1973. It was a brand new car. We got in it, and I tried to crank it. It wouldn't crank. I said, oh, my. And then kept trying, and finally it cranked up. It did run really rough, and we got out of there. And the first stop that we made was at a little Magic Mart store, because they had a payphone out there. Back then, they didn't have cell phones. They just had payphones. So we stopped, and Charlie got on the phone, and he called Keesler. Keesler told Charlie, we don't investigate that kind of thing anymore. You need to call the local authorities, because we just don't check into this anymore. So Charlie did. He called the sheriff department. That was as local as you can get. And they said, stay right there where you are. We're going to check you. We're going to be there in just a minute. And it wasn't but just a few minutes they was there. And we took them at the word. They stayed there. And they pulled up, and they looked in the car to see what was going on. They got us out of the car, did a sobriety test, checked to see if they thought we was on drugs, or checked to see if we was drinking. And Charlie had one little drink out of a Jim Beam bottle that he had. I didn't even know it was in the car. And they told me, they said, well, get in, you can drive, and follow us back to the sheriff department. So they took us back to the sheriff department, and they took us into separate rooms. Charlie went in a different room, and I went in a room. Some people went with him, and some with me. They interrogated us. Then they put us in the same room. Well, little did I know that this room that they put us in, they had a tape recorder hid in there, and they was listening to Charlie and I's conversation. So they left us in there together for a few minutes, and then they said, put us back into different rooms. And the head sheriff came in, Fred Diamond. He went in there, and I seen him get the tape recorder out, and they listened to the tape. He come in, and he said, we're going to let y'all go on home now, or go wherever you want to. So if we'd been drinking, that should have answered a lot of questions. Right then, they wouldn't have never let us drive away from there.
Right.
They'd still been writing tickets. But we got in a car, and we was going to drive home. Oh, gosh, lightning just hit. I'm sorry.
Oh, boy.
So we was going to drive home, and we stopped again at a Magic Mart store on the way in, and just sat there for just a minute. Everything was closed, because at a small town at this time of the night now, there's nothing open. So we sat there and talked just a minute. And I said, Charlie, I'm really worried about being contaminated, about something being known as radiation, or maybe some kind of bacteria or something. We need to get checked. He said, don't worry about it. We'll take care of that tomorrow. And it did. It really bothered me that night that there was something. I didn't want nobody else to be contaminated to nothing. And so we went on home. We went to Charlie's place. I was renting a room from him at the time. So when we got home, I went into my room, and I pulled all my clothes off, all my shoes off. I put them in a garbage bag. And I went in and took a good shower, and I took my stuff out and threw it in the. Then all of a sudden, I went to bed, and I woke up, and it was time for us to go to work. I don't guess Charlie ever went to bed. I don't know if he had told his wife that night and kids or not. I don't think he did, because we done agreed between us that we wasn't going to tell anybody. So we went to work the next morning. We got to work, and we was out on the field or out working on a ship, and the head office sent somebody down to get us. The press had started rolling in. They was calling. They was stopping their phones up. I mean, they had to pretty much shut the office down because they couldn't get no calls and do no business. So I talked to one of the supervisors the other day, and I didn't even know he was down here. And when he found out I was doing a book, he come and told me, he said, "Calvin, I don't know that you remember me." And then I did remember him when he started talking. He said, "But the one thing I remember about you is you being on your hands and knees throwing up outside at the parking lot when I sent up for you." I said, "Yeah, I was pretty upset." So we got back to the office, and that's when we found out that the press somehow, either the sheriff department had leaked it out or somebody had. But the only people that knew was Charlie, myself, Keesler, that they had called Keesler and the sheriff department. So I figured back then everybody's hobby was listening in on these scanners, and that's about the only thing they could do. And I believe that's the way that they picked all this up. But it was a nightmare from there on.
So those were like guys, ham radio operators, the CB scanners?
Yes, sir. And the sheriff department had one, and, they would put stuff out on that. So, I got a feeling that's how everything got leaked out. But I know it was rough right there for a few days. They had when we got to work, the shipyard had an attorney that they called in for us, and he set up an appointment to get checked for radiation, and he set up an appointment at the hospital there for us to go get checked, our health to be checked. So we went in, and of course the health checked out good, everything but being shook up. The radiation at Keesler, we pulled up, and that was really scary. It was probably 10 people standing outside with these suits on. And I thought, the hospital must have found something really bad wrong with us, or they wouldn't be doing this. But they did. They did that, and they said, "Y'all clear. Y'all wait right here a minute. We're going to send somebody down here to get you and take you up to the office." So they took us in the office at Keesler. We walked down a long hallway, and when we got there, we went in, and they asked a lot of questions, nothing that you'd figure that they would ask, but they just wanted to check our sincerity and all that and talk to us. And then they turned around and let us go.
Did you ever hear anything from any government agencies after that?
I didn't. Somewhere before the hurricane, they sent the minutes out on that meeting, and mine got all destroyed during Katrina. We got about 8 foot of water in the house, so everything, all my files and stuff like that got destroyed. Oh. Not that I cared, because I was never going to write a book or do anything with it anyway.
Yes. Do you want to tell us the name of your book just once again, and where people can get it, because that's part of the purpose of being on the show, I'm guessing.
Okay, it's Pascagoula, The Closest Encounter, My Story, Calvin Parker, and Amazon has them on sale.
Excellent.
So
excellent.
They just go to Amazon and click books and give them the title when it pops up.
Now, one thing that seems to be universal amongst people who have been abducted, and also some of us who have been experiencers, is an absolute feeling of animal terror when these beings have you paralyzed, is the best way I could put it from my experience. But I've never, to my knowledge, been abducted, but I have had experience, and the terror was overwhelming. And I believe the terror was overwhelming for Travis Walton and for our other guest, Terry Lovelace. Do you have anything to say about that, Kate?
No.
Yeah.
But what always strikes me is like even with Betty and Barney Hill, when they remember that tape we heard up New Hampshire. Yeah, remember his voice? Terrified. And I mean, this is a strong man, and he was terrified. There's no other word for it. And I read the interview at the sheriff's office with you, Calvin, and the sheriff was impressed by the fact that, you're obviously a strong young guy, and I'm sure not given to silly fears, but he was very impressed by your amount of fear. And I mean, it's terrifying. You're sitting there and these weird things come and they get you. You don't know why or where, and boom, they're gone. That's scary.
It seems to be
How about Terry?
a different kind of terror, though. It seems, from my experience, like a deep animal terror. What do you have to say about that, Terry Lovelace?
I'm glad you asked that question. In my book, I said that it had to be some kind of primal fear from, way deep in the brain stem, something, something ancient, something old, something we're born with. It was the most terrifying event in my life.
And nobody forgets it. That's the other thing. So, Calvin, yours was 1973, and I'm sure you could remember every detail today. And
I
same
can
with
remember
you, Terry.
every detail, and I remember being scared. Just imagine if you're sitting in the living room of your house and somebody kicks the door down.
You're right.
And comes in there and gets you and takes you out and throw you in a car and gives you an examination. It's scary. And this was even more scarier because it's nothing you can relate it to. I had no idea what a abduction was or a UFO, or never even thought about life being on another planet up until that time. Now it's no doubt in my mind
Calvin,
about it.
Did you say that when they picked you up, you suddenly felt calm?
I did. And I feel like they probably gave an injection, because when they was giving me the examination at the hospital, they did find a mark on my arm. And the arm that they grabbed hold and picked me up. And that was amazing, too, because they did that, and you figure it'll break your arm off or something when they did, but it's just levitated you straight.
Yeah, I had that feeling of calm at one point, but eventually that left, and then it was just terror from that point on.
Yeah, and I've lived with that for 45 years, and what's more terror than anything is I didn't want to talk about it, and I've just come to reality with it here these past few months. But the press followed me around, and they would make up stories that I had said, and I really didn't say nothing because I wouldn't talk to them. So they would have to make up some stories to say that they got an interview, and they never. And that made me as mad as anything, because if you're going to say something, say the truth. It don't matter how it is, but just be honest about what you say. So I finally came to reality with the whole thing. We was at a friend's wake. One of my neighbors had passed away, and me and my wife was there, and I actually had to leave the wake because it was causing too much disturbance. It was the people that knew me, and they was wanting to take pictures and get autographs and all. And I don't even know how they figured my name out and all, but this is a small town again. So we left. Then when I left, about that time, Philip had contacted me about doing a book. And when he did, I really didn't want to do a book at all. And I could still care less. I'm glad I did now, but I could have cared less about doing a book or anything else. I just wanted to be left alone. But between Philip and my wife, and both of them encouraging it, I was able to get out and do what I could on a book, and Philip was real good help putting it together, and my wife was. So we got it all done, and I feel better talking about it now.
Good.
Yes.
Yeah, it's nothing like the light of day to take some of the fear away, really. And, I think the fact that people begin to believe you, and it's certainly an unusual experience, but don't make it even more unusual than it was, helps a lot, too.
Yes, and having people who have had similar experiences, such as Terry, who we have on, and of course the great Travis Walton. So what would you say your life was like? I don't mean immediately before the incident, but like what kind of a guy were you growing up? What did you think about? Did you have any interest in the paranormal? Did you have other paranormal experiences earlier in your lifetime?
Well, in a way I did, but I never took it as a paranormal experience. We was brought up, you know, in a smaller house, and my brother and I used to sleep together. And he'd tell me, you know, he called me Pee Wee. He said, there's something that's always standing over there by you. Or one night I heard a blow in my ear. He said, there's a ghost blew in your ear. He said, I seen it. And I thought he was just crazy up until then, but I heard it when it happened. And then just other little things, but I never really thought about any of the paranormal or anything. But I think that had been going on for a long time, and I just didn't realize it. And I got to a stage where, you know, I had to accept it or they had to accept me. But there's been other incidents, and that they all in the book, but such as missing time. I had a period of a lot of missing time when I was fishing, and I was concerned about it. So I wasn't concerned enough to talk to anybody I knew, but I knew Bud Hopkins had written a book on missing times, and I told my wife, I said, I'm going to go see Bud Hopkins. I don't know him, but I think he might see me. So he was giving speaking at a lecture somewhere in West Palm Beach, Florida. We got on a plane, flew to West Palm Beach, and Bud was there. But he knew of my name and all, and he knew of the case. So when he got through speaking, I walked up and introduced myself. He said, I've been wanting to talk to you. So I agreed to let Bud hypnotize me. And up until Philip got a hold of the tapes, you know, Bud had passed away,
yes,
but he kept tapes and records on everything. I never even knew I was hypnotized. I didn't know what was on the tapes. I had no clue, no idea. Matter of fact, I didn't think I could be hypnotized. But Philip somehow got a hold of the tapes, and it was amazing to me what was on there. They was stuff, and I think he had put a post-hypnotic suggestion in my head that I would remember them as I could handle them. And here lately, you know, the memories is starting to come back when I read through there. Then I remember, I said, well, you know, I remember that. So it's really scary. They even got a tag number off a car that was down when Charlie and I was abducted. They got a tag number that I noticed on a car. It was a couple down there parking, and I finally got a hold of the people that had the car, and this couple had got married, and he passed away. She's still alive. She's pretty old right now, and she didn't want to talk about it. But anyhow, she remembered that night because of what happened.
She saw it.
She did. She remembered it. And they had left. They got in that car and flew out of there.
I'll bet.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't blame them.
Hey, Calvin, can I ask a real quick question? After this happened, did you feel differently about Charlie? Did it affect your relationship with him in some way?
It did. It affected in a big way. There for a long time, I thought Charlie's the one that broke it to the press. Matter of fact, after this happened, when we got through with our meetings at Keesler in the hospital and doing what we needed to do, I went on and lived a different life. I went back to my hometown, Laurel, Mississippi, and Charlie stayed up here on the coast, and I wouldn't call him or speak to him. I'd speak to him every now and then, but I felt like Charlie was out hunting publicity or something. I didn't want it on me. But I think Charlie was just concerned and wanting to get the story out there, what it was.
And Charlie has passed away now.
He is. He's passed away now. And that's like I told somebody, even in this book, you know, I don't care if people believe it or not. I know it happened, so I don't have to believe it. It definitely happened to me.
Good for you.
You know, we've took polygraph tests, voice stress tests, and everything else, Charlie and I both.
Terry, what made you ask that question? Had you an experience like that? Like changing your relationship with other people?
Absolutely. In my book, I point that out immediately after the event. Mm-hmm. I looked at, Tobias is what I call him in the book, and I could feel it. And I said, my feelings for this guy changed. And, you would think just going through this thing, we'd want to talk about it. But there were hardly any words said between us in the 6 hours it took to get back to base. And afterward, I didn't want to see the guy. I wanted nothing to do with him.
Why was that? I wonder.
I don't know. As a matter, we had a no contact order. I was ordered not to have any contact with him. Uh-huh. I guess they didn't want us putting our stories together. Uh-huh. And I did see him one last time, and I went to his house and I saw him, and I was upset, he was upset, and it was real brief. And all he had to say was, "It happened, didn't it, Terry?" Mm. And I said, "Yeah, it did happen." Wow. And then I turned around and I ran to the car, and we got out of there. And that's the last I saw of him.
I have two things to say about that. The first thing is just in terms of Terry, that was Kate on the line, and Kate wasn't here when we did your podcast. She was unavailable that day, and so that's why she didn't know didn't know exactly what you had said on the show when you and your book were on. The second thing that I wanted to say is the following: that although I was never, to my knowledge, abducted, I was walking in one of my encounters in the woods in New Jersey, and I was accompanied by other little kids. I might have been 10 or 11 at the time, in that age range, and I was walking in the woods, and we came upon a house that was never there before. It was a cottage, and we had been in this part of the woods. There were little trails around the lake community where I used to go in the summertime with my parents, and this house never existed prior to this. And we looked at it together, and I kind of decided in my mind that it looked like the cottage from Hansel and Gretel. And and there were lace curtains in the windows, which is something that I particularly remember. And there had been some camp houses in the vicinity, like where the Girl Guides used to go. But they were a few, like city blocks away. They weren't right there, generally speaking. But there was no way, because those were abandoned at that time, and there was no way that there ought to have been a cottage with lace curtains in the window, and also no road leading up to it. Because if you're going to keep a house, generally you're going to have to come in a car or at least a wagon. There was nothing leading up to it except the path, the forest path that we were on. Well, simultaneously, me and the two other kids that were with me, we looked at this house, and we turned around on our heels and ran as fast as we could to get out of there, because we knew intrinsically that there was something wrong with what we saw. And I think that we passed a couple of words on the way back about how it looked like the cottage from Hansel and Gretel, and then they never spoke of it again. Okay? I knew them, but they never spoke of it again. So I think that was what do you call that?
Screen memory.
Screen memory, exactly.
But so, Terry, it's interesting. You described it as primal fear, and that type of fear is sort of basic underlying most psychology. And I think if that blacks out, everything else goes out too, and that anything that causes it to come back up is really going to be terrible. And that's probably why you guys don't talk to people that you shared this experience with.
Yes, well, not a lot of people understand. I mean, I think Calvin understands.
Yeah.
And I understand Calvin.
Well, one thing, y'all speaking of Betty Barney Hill, I went to see Betty Hill. I spent a few days there with her. And during the time that I was abducted and had met her, it wasn't too many people that had,
right.
Yeah, I'm sure it had been abducted, but it wasn't too many people that was talking about it. So we were able to establish a relationship, and we sat down, and even up until she died, I would talk to her on the phone. But she is so credible. I mean, she is just a sweet, lovely person, and I enjoyed my time with her. And she drove me up in the mountains and showed me a place where she thought that she had been abducted, and that there was craft still flying up in there. There was something going on.
She saw quite a few things after that. But, you talk about fear. Betty Hill actually got over her fear. If you recall her story, when she was leaving the craft, she absolutely demanded a souvenir. And one of the aliens or whoever said, "Oh, okay," because she was so insistent. And then the commander or whatever said, "No, you can't give her that." And she insisted, remember? Yeah, the map. That's right, the map.
The star map, right.
Oh, that's right. And then it was that insult. Yeah, why should I give it to you? You don't know what you're looking at anyway. So, but she was a very sweet, lovely person, but boy, she was tough as nails, I'll tell you.
Back then you had to be tough. She was married, a white woman married to a black man, and that was a no-no.
Right.
So, I know they took a lot of harsh punishment, and the last thing they would do is want any publicity on themselves.
Correct. So. Yeah, both lovely people.
Indeed, they were.
And how bad, I wonder sometimes if whoever is doing this realizes how badly it affects people's lives. I'm sure your life, both of you, went off in somewhat of a different direction after the event.
It did. I was a very religious person when this happened. I mean, very religious. Well, after this, I got real quiet and I pulled back to myself. I never talked to my family or friends about it. And matter of fact, I never talked to my wife or nobody about it. The other day, I had a friend say, I told him, I said, I wrote a book. You ought to go get you one and I'll sign it for you. He said, "What you didn't write a book, did you?" I said, "Yeah, I did." He said, "Well, you've lied to me about a lot of stuff, Calvin, but I've never heard you tell nothing about this, about being abducted or anything." He said, "I believe there's really something to that." I said, "Well, it is." Yeah. So I need to hit you between the eyes of two before and get your attention. But
I had the same experience. I published the book, and I had told no one. It was a secret my wife and I shared. We didn't tell our adult children. All they knew is that, every once or twice a year, Dad would wake up screaming. But
you never told your children.
Pardon?
Why didn't you tell your children? I mean, your adult children obviously wouldn't tell the child, but
it felt like a secret. I mean, I had to overcome that. I felt like when I was writing this book, like I was giving away some family secret or something. I felt like I wasn't supposed to tell. And that was a very strong emotion for me, to not tell anyone. And I intended to take it to my grave. And if they hadn't found these things in my leg in 2012, I most probably would have.
If it had not been for Philip and my wife, it would have went to my grave with me, the whole thing. Like I say, I would just tell everybody what they wanted to hear to get it off my back. And I never talked to my children about it. They knew about it because somebody say, "Oh, your daddy's the one that got abducted." And so, that's the way they knew. And I should have sat down and explained it to them. I should have sat down with my whole family and explained it to them. And I've got friends up until this last year that, we've just opened up, started talking about it when I started doing the book. And I got to give Philip credit for that. He's the one that's got me talking about it, and I feel a lot better doing it.
Good.
Yes.
And we thank Philip as well for putting us in touch with you. Terry, do you have some specific questions for Calvin that you have wanted to ask?
Just a couple kind of odd questions. Did you wear a wristwatch? Did you have trouble with your wristwatches not working?
I didn't have a watch.
Okay.
Charlie didn't have one either, because that's the reason we stopped at a place to try to see what time it was, and we had no clue what time it was. And then back in, it wasn't cell phone, so you couldn't open it up and look and see what time it was.
Did you have nightmares on a regular basis?
Not on a regular basis. Right after it happened, I went through, I guess, what you would call an anger mode, where I was just so angry about it, because I hated something being able to, just come in and take you against your will and do something.
Loss of control.
I know, yeah. Right. And I went through a lot of anger problems about that, but I didn't have a lot of nightmares, but a few I did. And I remember at the shipyard the next day after this, some of the guys at the shipyard, they were so upset about it. They all had boats, and they were all big deer hunters, and they all loaded up, and they come ask me, "You want to go hunting them tonight?" I said, "Hell no, I'm not going to hunt them, because they'll destroy you in a minute you go to shooting at them." I said, "Why do you want to do that anyhow?" So they went what they call alien hunting out there, and I didn't go with them. Wasn't about to. They better be glad that they didn't see them.
Oh, be careful what you wish for, boy.
Yeah, really. Oh, boy.
Right.
Whoa.
I will say, Calvin, I started carrying a handgun after my experience, and I do to this day. And I feel much more safe with it.
Do you think it would? Do you think it would work? I mean, or do you think they just sort of make you unconscious?
I'm sure that they could overcome me, but it just makes me feel more secure.
I can understand that.
I don't carry any kind of weapons. I have them here at home for protection of my family, but as far as for protection of me, I get on the boat sometime at night and I go out fishing and go right by myself, and I'm fine with that. Mama said, "You're not afraid they're going to get you? If they want you, it's nothing you're going to do about it." So, yeah, I have a fear sometimes.
There is just not enough money in the world to make me take by myself in a boat out at night after an experience like yours.
Oh, I just went out the other night and had a blast. I
Really?
mean, you know what I like about it? You get out there, you're sitting there by yourself, it's quiet, and the moon was out full. It was the night of that moon was supposed to do something. And you're sitting there looking how beautiful it is and just listening. And we live in an area, is swamp area. It's nothing but swamps. To the left, you got the Gulf, and to the right, you got your marshland and the woods and the swamp. And it's the only unchanged river in the world, in the United States, that hadn't been deserted. And it's beautiful. People don't realize how nice it is down here until you go out on it. They do these eco tours where they take you out and let you see the wildlife, the alligators, the deer, the coons. And my wife and I actually had a bear fall out of a tree and hit our boat. And now that was scary too. I thought maybe there might be something to that, but it was a bear.
Well, it sounds like a beautiful environment to be in. I would need some insect repellent, but it sounds like quite a beautiful environment. I lived for a year in Baton Rouge, and I kind of get the picture.
Oh, I love it. Yeah, if you lived in Baton Rouge, you know how the humidity is, the bugs are, the people. You got some of the best people in the world down here. I mean,
absolutely.
They'll fight between themselves sometime, but that's like the group of friends. I don't have many friends, but the ones I do have, all you got to do is pick up a phone, say, "I need you," and they'll be here. I flooded last year before last, the house flooded, and we didn't have insurance at the time. I didn't have the flood insurance hadn't kicked in. They all chipped together. One of them brought the floor, and the other one brought the labor, and everybody come, and they had our floors and all put in, the drywalls and stuff put in. That's just the kind of people it is down here.
Looking out for one another. That's great.
They do. And there's nothing I wouldn't do for them or they wouldn't do for us. And when I say us, I talk about my family.
So, just to ask a couple of more questions, because it comes to my mind, could you describe the robot type character that you saw just floating above the ground or the water, and what that creature looked like?
I could. No, he was scary. He had gray, wrinkled skin. His facial features, Charlie said he seen their face, and they was little objects, you know, kind of like ears and stuff. But I didn't see none of that. That was kind of a blur to me. His legs, you could tell it looked kind of like legs in a way, but they wasn't separate. They was all together, no feet. His hands was like mittens on gloves or claws or something. But he was a real scary looking thing. Now, the other one was really, you know, not so scary, and I couldn't believe I could have sat down and talked to it for a while, and probably have. But the gray, wrinkled skin and stuff, I believe this one was more of a soldier than anything.
Uh-huh. Well, I recalled in Terry's account that there was a female hybrid that visited Terry several times after his abduction experience, and maybe you two guys want to throw that back and forth a little bit, because Calvin had mentioned that the being that he saw in the room where he was examined was seemingly somewhat female, but not really female, and he didn't go in much further into that. So maybe you guys could throw that back and forth for a few minutes.
I'll just say that I'll call her a woman. The woman I see is about 4 foot 2 inches tall or so, just a tad over 4 foot tall, and she looks like an Asian woman. And when I was young, I think I was abducted by her. I know I was abducted by her. And I referred to her as Sue. There was an elderly Asian woman in our neighborhood named Sue. And as a young child, I called her Sue. But then later in life, I met her again. And she talked to me, not verbally, but with her mind. And she would send me a sentence, and I would respond, and she would respond before I had my sentence finished. I don't know if you've experienced anything like that.
Yeah. Now, when Bud Hopkins hypnotized me, this is where most of mine came out. It was definitely a female, and but she wasn't real nice. I mean, it was more or less like torture during that one time. Matter of fact, I get to this part of the book, and if you get the book, just kind of, when you read it, be sure you go through the hypnosis with Bud, because it's a lot of information in there. And it tells about the way that she examined and pulled you apart. But this one on the craft, I think you could call her more or less like a hybrid. You know, I believe that kind of half-half, it might have been a mixed breed of human and her through the years or something. That's because it wasn't as scary.
Yeah, this woman told me she was half hybrid and half alien.
And I believe that. I believe that they happen. Now, I've also heard of walk-ins, and I actually been a walk-in one time, and that was kind of scary, because they tell me that they have to give permission for them to come into the body and use it to get down here and live with us. And I believe that there's walk-ins around right now.
How did they identify themselves as a walk-in, or how did you suspect they were a walk-in?
Well, it was just something about it. When I got up there and I started staring, it was a lady, and I never met her before in my life. And I got up there and I kind of felt uncomfortable a little bit around her. And she looked at me, she said, "You do know," and she had no idea who I was, "You do know that I'm a walk-in, don't you?" I said, "Now, what the hell is a walk-in?" That was the first time I ever heard about it. And she told me a little bit about it, and how she had gave permission for them to use her body so that she could study. And I had no idea. if she was or not, but I felt like she was.
This is quite fascinating in light of the fact that the question that was posed to Travis Walton at the MUFON symposium by the gentleman, and he just said yes, about have you ever met in a public context someone that you felt was not truly human. And so to me, this is a very fascinating line of inquiry to go forward with. And another thing that I'm sort of want to point out here is that although Bill and Kate and myself are all experiences and not knowing abductees, it is kind of unusual that we didn't really seek out doing this type of a show. In other words, we weren't focused on abductees. We weren't against abductees, certainly, but we didn't focus on it, and they just kept coming at us like Booher, I'm trying to think of his first name, David Booher, who wrote the book about the other military abductee. And then I hear from Terry, and then I hear from you, Calvin, through Philip, and it just seems to be that these things are coming to us, and so I feel obligated to move forward with it, and I do find it very interesting, if not terrifying, having been, rather an experiencer myself. The terror is still somewhere hidden in the back of my reptilian mind, the reptilian part of the brain, I mean. I'm not a reptilian, thank you.
Yeah. I think that one day they're going to need somebody to communicate with them, and they probably, people like y'all are going to be the ones to do that. And I feel like that they watching that now, and that one day you're going to be like a spokesman to them, because it would scare the general public if they just came out in force right now. Look at Austin Wells in the radio show, and it was just fake, and he had made it. I mean, people went crazy. Yeah. Yes, so they know that they need somebody to speak from, and they training people now. And I feel like that it's walk-ins or people, hybrids around that is in this training process. And I think y'all might be an important part of that before it's over.
Well, the other thing that's interesting, though, and Fahrusha brought it up, is like both of you were around military bases. Do you think there was any sort of undercover work there from the military?
I don't know. It's hard to say about the military. During the time that I was abducted, they had more problems to worry about. Vietnam was just winding down and stuff. Right. And Dr. Hynek, when he came to hypnotize me and harder, I tried to talk to him a little bit, but it was so many people around that it was hard to carry on a conversation with him. I would have loved to got into some of his case files, see what he was doing.
Most of my experiences, not all, but most of them happened in the vicinity of the Picatinny Arsenal in North Jersey.
Well, there may be a whole division in the military, because as soon as you get reports of these crashes, boom, out of nowhere, you have this division that comes along, covers it up, takes it away, bing, bang, boom.
The men in black, and then there's the real men in black, and they are kind of indistinguishable to most people. But as we know from some of the former contactees, that the men in black, some of them have anachronistic features, and physically they're not quite right, like their ears aren't quite like human ears, or their fingers look funny, and they don't understand how to eat Jell-O and stuff like that. So it's a real...
But I agree with you, Calvin. It seems like certainly the military has a lot more on its plate than that, and you wonder why they would even do something like that. I mean, what the purpose of it? Or how about you, Terry? I mean, did you ever have any feeling that it was like possibly military, government, something of that nature?
What I saw was not. I was in the Air Force at the time. What I saw was absolutely nothing. Yeah. Like, there's no way. I mean, this thing was so big; it was a city block long on each side and 5 stories high. Yeah. And sat 30 feet above the ground. And there's just no way. I do know this, that the Air Force was extremely interested in trying to find out if I had taken photographs of it, because I have a reputation of being an amateur photographer. And they wanted to make sure I didn't have any photographs of it.
Interesting.
Why don't you mention your name of your book again? First Calvin, and then Terry. How's that?
Okay, Pascagoula, The Closest Encounter, My Story, Calvin Parker. And you get it through Amazon.
Go ahead, Terry.
My book is also through Amazon, and it's Incident at Devil's Den. Devil's Den is the state park down where we went camping when we were abducted. So, Incident at Devil's Den.
That's northern Arkansas, correct, Terry?
Yes, okay. Northwestern Arkansas.
All righty. So, do you have any more questions, Kate, that you want to ask right now? Because we're coming on the 6 o'clock hour here.
Oh, are we really? Oh, I could talk to these two fellows forever.
No, I could too, and I'm sure. Well, we want to thank both of you for being such wonderful guests for us today. Do you have anything you want to add, Calvin?
No, I believe that's pretty much it. I'll be happy to come back anytime. Just let me or Philip one know.
Absolutely.
And
we'd like to
I really thank y'all for having me.
Well, thank you.
And Calvin, I'd like to say I understand, and I'm glad you had the courage to write the book and do this. So I think it's important that people know this stuff.
I want to get your book, Terry, and read it and see what you have to say in there. I've just now started reading stuff, that other people's been through. I knew Travis Walton, and I had heard his story, but I never really got into it to listen. And I actually went to watch his movie, Fire in the Sky. And I've always wanted to ask him if the movie was close to what had happened to him or something Hollywood put out.
Well, he has answered that question at symposiums where I have watched him, and he said there were certain elements of the movie which were quite true. Other elements were not true. For instance, in the movie, they showed 5 guys in the truck instead of 7, and that rather made a difference in some of the things. But you should know at this point, there is another movie called Travis, the true story of Travis Walton. And that's out there, probably available also on Amazon as a downloadable, watchable movie. It's a private movie. In other words, it's not been released into the theater. But if you go on to Amazon, the name of the movie is Travis, the true story of Travis Walton.
Okay, well, I'm going to get it and watch it because I've always wondered about that. Matter of fact, I have Travis on my Facebook page, and I'll ask him.
Okay. And Calvin, if you would give Fahrusha your mailing address, and maybe she can give it to me, I'll send you a copy of my book.
Good deal. Thank you.
Okay, so at this point, we're going to say goodbye and thank you very much to both of our brave, illustrious guests, and we can't thank them enough, and we hope they both will come back and speak with us again, and who knows, we might get some panels going here with some other abductees, contactees, or experiencers. So let's just say goodbye to our guests. I have a few more items to discuss with Kate and Bill here. So long, fellas.
Yeah, it's been a real pleasure speaking to both of you. Thank you so much, Terry and Calvin.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
That's quite okay.
Bye.
Thank you. Take care.
So, first of all, I wanted to say that to the people that have been writing in to our and my various websites, both Fahrusha.wordpress.com, shatteredreality.wordpress.com, and shatteredreality.com. There have been some commenters. I have been running on empty for about the last 10 days between doing the shows and also going to the MUFON Symposium and a few other things. So I haven't gotten to answer all of them, but I'm going to have some acknowledgments, hopefully at our next show. But I did want to acknowledge Billy Cox of the Void blog, and Rob Freeman from the UK, radar expert, and our good old friend Earl Voss, because I have
Hi, Earl.
Hi, Freeman. Hi, Earl. Hi, Billy, if you're listening. I have no idea whether Billy actually listens or not. But I know that Freeman and Earl do. And it's been very helpful in putting some of the things together, getting some insights from our listeners. So, listeners, you're out there. I know you're out there. And I would like you, if possible, to make some comments on the blog. If you are an experiencer of any sort, doesn't have to be UFO experiencer. It could be an out-of-body experiencer, or like somebody who's had a near-death experience, a poltergeist experience. You know the drill. You know these things that we talk about. So please get in touch with us. If you want to get in touch with us on our websites, I just named them. Shatteredreality.com, shatteredreality.wordpress.com, and Fahrusha.wordpress.com. Otherwise, you can email me separately at Fahrusha@Fahrusha.com. Fahrusha is spelled Fahrusha, at the @ Fahrusha.com. So don't hide out. Come out of the woodwork, and we will speak with you. If you do not want to be on the show in voice, I will read your experience, or Kate will read your experience at the end of the show. What do you say, Kate?
That's good.
All right. So I think it's time. Do you have any announcements, Kate?
Nope.
So what do we do now?
Say goodbye.
Okay.
Goodbye
from Shattered Reality.